Hello, everybody. Welcome to part two of Battle of the Ballads. I am Dan here with Greg and Joe, or the brothers Dilcox, as I referred to them last time, and it's still just stuck in my brain and I can't let it go. We are going to be breaking down the years of 1986 and 1987 tonight and sharing our track of the year as we head towards the best track of the 80s for the 6 years we're covering because we're having fun with it. And I'm actually really curious to see where this is going to go because there were so many genres that were so prevalent from about the end of 85 through 89 that totally changed music as we knew it growing up. So I'm really curious to see where you guys are going to go with this. I like that in the last round, you went with cultural relevance and significance as opposed to just overall, like, oh, I like the song. And I admittedly went the complete opposite route. And I'm going to be honest, for all the 80s, I'm doing that. But I love the thorough research that you invested in. Are you wearing the Smiths as a t-shirt today, Greg?
I am wearing the Smiths, so let's get some spoiler alerts because I'm also holding a first print U.S. edition of The Queen is Dead as well.
Yeah, so it's so cool.
$3 for the t-shirt, $30 for the record. One of the two is increased in value.
I was going to ask what that cost you, so yes, excellent. And since that caught my eye first, I know we started with Joe last time, but let's start with Greg this time because I was so focused on this t-shirt, and now I need to listen to some stuff tonight when we end this segment.
You were focused on the t-shirt because I mentioned last night during our podcast that I've been wearing specific t-shirts for recordings and not bringing attention to them. So,
yeah, no, you totally made me bring attention to it. You fucked me with some mind games. So let's roll with them.
Yeah. Okay. Before I actually get into it, first, obviously, our condolence to Earl Simmons, aka DMX's family, as he's fighting for his life still. I know TMZ reported drug overdose, but the family has just said they're releasing a statement to counteract. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, there's a man fighting for his life, a man who, in my mid-teens, helped me make friends starting in junior high. So singing about the Rough Riders in tech class, that endeared me to other people. So wishing the best to his family, hoping he can recover. I know on life support it's tough, but DMX, you could argue one of the 50 greatest of all times, although unfortunately we don't discuss hip-hop the way we do other music because, let's face it, DMX and Busta Rhymes were rapping around the same time but are not the same rappers.
There's genres within the genre, absolutely. When I got the news on Earl, that just kind of hit me in the gut, man. So many years of just my youth listening to that. I remember wearing a Sean Kemp jersey, bumping "It's Dark and Hell is Hot" on the basketball court. Just pretending I could play basketball. So yeah, no, I definitely feel it. It hit me in the gut. Definitely.
And of course, I'm positive we will at least be mentioning DMX as we get through the 90s and early 2000s, because you just mentioned arguably his best album, but my favorite's The Great Depression. So
I have him on 3 very short lists that I'm still working through in the 2000s. So we'll see what happens there.
You guys do work ahead of time?
Yeah, I'm a big overachiever. You know, I don't have enough to do with all my reports and everything else, but honestly, I listen to Spotify all day and I listen to my playlists and I'm like, oh, God, add this to a list. So it just naturally happens. And as we've gotten older, my ADHD has gotten much worse and it's untreated and it's just a post-it note heaven. So I should probably buy stock of that company because they're all on my lists. Even before this, I got to talk about this song somewhere. But, you know, that's where we are. Now, Greg, as we dive into the great year of 1986 in the most random way, what tracks are we looking at, my friend?
Well, we don't just listen to Spotify as the Dilly Brothers. We do meticulous research on easily accessible websites. But I don't have any Post-it notes, so you're dealing with your ADHD better than I am because I just have mental Post-it notes that But I did do the research for this. I do have a list. Short list for 1986. After 85, I thought maybe we were going to get into a lull throughout the 80s, but 86 and 87, I have longer short list again, and this is trying to keep it down for my 30-song 85. But I Just Died in Your Arms Tonight, Cutting Crew, Dancing on the Ceiling, Lionel Richie, Higher Love, Steve Winwood, If You Leave, OMD, which is the only band I think that I accept an abbreviation for. I want you to say the full band's name. Don't come at me with STP for Stone Temple Pilots. But
FOB, FOB, FOB.
But with OMD, the abbreviation works. But then the Bengals had Manic Monday, Walk Like an Egyptian, which I guess you could look at as being problematic now, but it was a dance craze.
Yeah.
We Don't Have to Take Our Clothes Off, Jermaine Stewart, which is one of my favorite bits from the show Scrubs.
Yes.
Walk This Way, Run DMC, and Aerosmith. The Way It Is, Bruce Hornsby and the Range. And I know Hornsby and the Range had quite a few hits in like between 85 and 87. This is the only one that makes any of my short list. And I really only like it as much as I do because of the Tupac sample.
Yeah, exactly. That RL sang, yes.
Yeah. Take Me Home Tonight, Eddie Money. And then I listed No Sleep Till Brooklyn by the Beastie Boys, but I have an asterisk because honestly, that first Beastie Boys album, 3/4 of it could have been the best song of 1986 for me. But I think that one is my favorite one. I think Fight for Your Right for a Party for years of my life would have, but so many people don't realize that that was supposed to be a satire to like the party anthems of the 80s. So it gets knocked down my list. Hi, Zoe.
Yeah.
All right, you got to get to bed, kid. We talking music. You're not ready for this stuff yet.
But if the shirt and the record didn't give it away, for me, the song of the year comes from The Queen Is Dead. And I believe the song I picked, we could be controversial because it came out in England before 86, but it was released in the States on The Queen Is Dead in 1986. And that is There's a Light That'll Never Go Out. An all-time favorite song for me. I didn't listen to the Smiths until I was probably like 16 or 17. And I don't think Joe started listening to them until he was in his mid-20s, and it was always at the bar on the jukebox. It is one of the most awkwardly romantic songs of all time, and it gets me every time. I love the song, but this is another album I did an asterisk for because you have The Queen Is Dead, Frankly, Mr. Shankly, I Know It's Over, Never Had One, Never Had, No One Ever, Cemetery Gates, Big Mouth Strikes Again, The Boy with the Thorn in His Side, which in my Smith's shitposting Facebook group, that is one of the consensus favorite songs.
Yes.
Vicar in a Tutu was considered one of the most underrated. There's a Light That Never Goes Out, and Some Girls Are Bigger Than Others, which is the most memed track in that group. But this album is just, it is the best Smiths album in my opinion, and every one of those songs was notable in that year, but There's a Light That Never Goes Out, hands down for me.
I definitely remember playing that cassette tape out in my Walkman to the point where I had to rewind the tape with a pencil kind of move.
Which there is a notice on the back of the record that is also available on cassette. I do not own it in cassette yet. If someone wants to get me a cassette copy, I have the shirt, I have it on CD, I have it on vinyl. If someone wants me to send me a cassette or an 8-track of it, I'm there for it.
I would like to see if I have mine, but I don't believe that I still do.
It's one of my all-time favorite drunk songs. If I have been drinking, it probably comes on my Spotify at some point. I absolutely love it for that reason. It's my favorite.
Comes on your Spotify, comes through a text message, comes on your Facebook.
That's also true.
Yeah, that's
so good.
Definitely a hot one. Now, Joe, where are you at with this?
Okay, so obviously There's a Light That Never Goes Out makes it to my short list because, again, I absolutely love it. One of my favorite songs of all time. Manic Monday also is on my list, mostly because it's one of my favorite Friday songs. It just gets me in a good mood driving to work on a Friday, listening to Manic Monday. And it makes me laugh every time. You Gotta Fight for Your Right to Party, Beastie Boys. It wasn't the first single off that album, but it was the best received, I guess, even though it was supposed to be a satire. And I love that they played into that persona so much that they joked that they became that persona at one point. So I think that's funny. Girls Ain't Nothing But Trouble. First single by DJ Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince. Awesome. I put Keep Your Hands to Yourself by the Georgia Satellites. I think this group does not represent country music very often or very, like comprehensively. So I figured I should throw one at least on my short list.
What does that song even count as?
I consider it country, but kind of like a pop country.
Yes. Yeah.
Living on a Prayer, also on my short list, just for its singability. There's not a lot more fun to sing than that song. But obviously, my favorite track of that year has to be Amanda by Boston, because that's where Amanda got her name from. Joking, she told me I had to say that. So, but no, the best song from that year, Walk This Way, Run DMC. For a couple reasons. It's interestingly made Aerosmith popular twice, right? When they were first coming on the scene in the 70s, it was huge. And then Tyler had his addiction and they kind of fell off for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then this started their resurgence afterwards, which I think is interesting. But also, it was one of the first real songs that started mixing the rock and rap, which we started seeing a lot more throughout the years. But as far as mainstream airplays and video plays, it was actually the first one that broke into MTV's video rotation with any consistency. And so it kind of set the stage for an entirely new genre of this hybrid sound. So,
I always hear that song and then I listen to influences in like the early years after that. And I mean, even if you listen to like Incubus's Fungus Among Us, it's like so influenced by just that fusion right there. And then, I mean, we had our rock rapper wannabes, Janko wearing dudes of the 90s and all that too. But it was very influential in a lot of ways. But I mean, if you look at it, it's when hip hop really took off, but also this rock just aspect of it that also played in a lot of different things. And it's actually came to life, like Lil Wayne kind of brought a lot of the rock stuff back with the guitar and all that stuff when he came. I'm not a big fan of his music, but there's certain elements of it that the 80s resurfaced in the late 2000s and kind of stuff, which is kind of cool to see.
But even, I mean, it set the stage for one of my favorite bands of all time. Like, I was a big Linkin Park fan growing up. Linkin Park was one of the first two CDs I ever owned, and it really shaped a lot of my teen years. And a lot of what they do probably wouldn't have been as well received if the stage isn't set years before that, right? So yeah. For me, again, I know I kind of tend to sit more with cultural relevance, which will change in the next couple of years because there are a couple where I'm just like, this is my favorite song.
Yeah, no, I'm there with you.
But for this case, I had to go Walk This Way, Run DMC.
I think there was a lot of musical relevance to that too, though, that just the implications of that track just changed so much for music. That was on my very short list. There, 86 we had Time of Run DMC, Bon Jovi, the Will Smith stuff I love. But I always go back to Dead Kennedys. I Fought the Law, and it was a song by the Crickets first, the Bobby Fuller 4 after, and it's just one of these tracks that when I hear it, it's on every playlist. It comes on, and I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't listened to this in a day. And it was so obscure at the time. We were living in an era of like, your Michael Boingo, your Jovies, your Run DMCs and everything else. And there was this just random track from this punk band that was just kind of sitting on the charts, getting some play in some places, but not enough. And it's a track that I think transcends time. It's a track that out of all of those songs, it still with me stands. And it's not like, I've heard this a million times. It's more of I love that I'm hearing this again kind of thing. So I know it's an underwhelming song for many, but I have to go with I Fought the Law by Dead Kennedys. I remember rocking the t-shirt because it matched my initials and being so happy about it.
But just this, oh, sorry. I didn't
go
cut
ahead.
you off. I was going to say just the story behind that version too, right? Because the lyrics were rewritten. Initially, it was about somebody actually trying to fight the law and losing to them. But that rewrite is about a cop who gets away with murder.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just in that alone, it still is kind of poignant today with how untouchable cops can be.
Yeah.
And that's a big touching point right now, right? So
there's a lot of deliberation over like what punk is and everything else. And I think if you really look at the lyrics, the message, and the delivery, that song is one of the most punk songs that we've had. And I will argue to the death. And it's just a track for me that resonates in so many ways. And I can't leave that year without saying that, despite the fact that I love so many songs from that year. That's the one that takes my vote.
You mentioned punk being such a hard thing to decide what is or wasn't punk. I think that's after emo, because I think emo is kind of a bullshit genre in its own. That's just become a label for songs from other genres. But I think punk becomes like that hardest one, because what's heavy, what's metal punk, what's pop punk, what's indie pop punk. So that'll be interesting as we go forward to see where our taste align in later days as punk has become 87 genres upon itself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even Beastie Boys were punk before they were hip hop, and based on the labeling, because they were a bunch of white dudes and you couldn't have them in rap. So, it's interesting with how you look at it. That's the line they were given, was they were punk, not hip hop, originally.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because while they were still like a straight up punk band, they did have a female drummer who didn't make the transition. And so they didn't get any flack, of course, back then, but it's become to light in more modern times.
Yeah.
And they've apologized to her. They've apologized to a female photographer from back then. So I think how they went about it at the time was wrong, but I think as grown men and adults, they've tried to address it and be more heads up about it. But I know,
without a doubt.
Well, back to your point before that about having trouble pinning down a genre, I find that to be true in most genres as well. Like even before that, Dan asked, what are we considering Georgia Satellites, Keep Your Hands to Yourself, right? And one of the things I like best, or some of the bands I like best, are the ones that just kind of say to hell with staying in a genre. I mean, one of my all-time favorite bands, A Day to Remember, what they jokingly call themselves the heaviest pop punk band in the world, because some tracks are straight up a pop punk thing, and then others are straight up hardcore screaming in your face. So I appreciate bands that are just like, screw genres, we're just going to make music we like.
That's, I think that's always been my biggest attraction to Prince, is he can play every instrument in the book. He will shred. He will give you great pop. I mean, Lenny Kravitz too, at the end of the day. I know a lot of people are sick with the pop that came out in later years, but his early shit is just fucking amazing. So that's really what draws me into musicians. Even, you look at Bob Marley's work, there's his popular songs and there's the deeper tracks, and that man is all over the spectrum when it comes to genres, even outside of reggae. So I love those that defy the box and the norm and just do what needs to be done for the name of music and for the name of a message.
Well, especially when we get into the branding of what is pop music, like there's a sound we think of that's pop, but pop is such a large branch. And we now mentioned a country pop song, which I think that might be the earliest example of country pop as a genre. I know Shania Twain and the Dixie Chicks onto early Taylor Swift before she's made that complete crossover. But
love T Swift.
There's been so many pop country artists, and within country music, they seem to have an uphill battle for legitimacy, which is kind of crazy because Johnny Cash was one of the most popular musicians in the world. And yes, he was not a pop country. He was just a straight country, but that was popular music. And
yeah, like pop music except popular,
Well, when he was there, country wasn't country. It was just music. It's interesting how the genres were just organically became something else. Now, I'm very curious to see where 87 goes here. For me, it was a no-brainer. And like I said, or like our last session, the 80s were really easy for me just because some of my favorite songs of all time came out of there and some of the songs that impacted me the most. And I know Greg's musical taste quite well, and so I have some guesses, but I'm really curious about this. And Joe, you kind of throw me some curveballs, and so I have no fucking idea what you're gonna say.
I don't think either of you are would have guessed this going into it.
And
I truly do not think that.
So Greg, take us to where your heart lies in the year of 1987. Now, what year? I was born 84. Greg, you were 85, right?
Correct. So I have very little memories of 87 and none that involved music. They all involved a fireplace in a garage and licking a Kool-Aid packet. So, those jarring memories. But 87 for me, 86, as you guys can tell, clearly with the song that was the personal favorite. 87, I went a different direction and went cultural relevance. Although I think in 87, the song didn't have the same cultural relevance it does now. But my short list starts off with Faith and I Want Your Sex by my man, George Michael.
That's where I thought you'd go, honestly.
I Need Love and I'm Bad, LL Cool J. But that entire album.
So good.
That might be one of his best. Not might be. It is one of his best. Might be his best. Tiffany's I Think We're Alone Now, which is an all-time great song to sing. I Want to Dance with Somebody might be my favorite song of the year.
Makes my dance now.
It's The End of the World as We Know It, parentheses, and I Feel Fine. And The One I Love by REM, which might be my two favorite REM songs. And REM was releasing steadily throughout this. So kind of a shame that this is the first time it's mentioned in one of our short lists. But honestly, I'm not a huge fan of that early REM stuff. I think this is when REM starts to get better. But also, I was exposed to the later stuff before the earlier stuff. But then You Got the Look.
Yes.
Prince and Sheena Easton. And Just Like Heaven by The Cure ends out my short list. Love The Cure. Love that song. Bob FM for a while was playing The Cure at 4:30 in the morning every morning. And I was working at 4 a.m. at the time. So it was always great to hear a Cure song at that time. But Never Gonna Give You Up.
You've got to be fucking kidding me.
Holy shit. Nope. Didn't see that coming.
You can go back to your original, Joe. But, I mean, this definitely isn't the best song of the year, but the cultural relevance, it's a great song. Not the best song of the year. The cultural relevance getting rickrolled and the fact that he took that in stride. We have a different opinion of that song if Astley himself didn't take Rick rolling and run with it. He became in on the joke instead of being the joke. And that was a brilliant move of his. I know Joe loves the cover he does with Dave Grohl, or is it with the entire Foo Fighters? I don't remember. He saw them do it live.
It's the entire Foo Fighters. They were at a festival one time together. And Dave was just like, hey, we play your song. Do you want to come out and do it with us? And he was like, yeah, I would love to do that. And so now if he's available, he will just travel with the Foo Fighters for events and just perform that song with them.
It's amazing. Together Forever is actually my favorite Rick Astley song. So when I hear Never Gonna Give You Up, I'm like, yeah, that song's everywhere. But man, have you heard Together Forever?
I'm not a huge Rick Astley fan, but this song, I think, it just transcends that year.
It's lived on longer than most.
And honestly, a lot of the songs, Faith, I Need Love, changed and created a genre within hip hop of that hip hop ballad. And obviously, I Want to Dance with Somebody's all-time Whitney Houston for me. So, and It's the End of the World as we know it, of course, gets play every time we have a world-ending pandemic or Armageddon, which seems to be every 2 or 3 months. So, and I think You Got the Look might be one of the most underrated Prince tracks. So there's a lot that transcends that year, but I don't think to the cultural relevance of Rick Astley, to the point where I don't even think a lot of these kids know who he is beyond the Rick rolling.
Man, I thought you were going to take George Michael. You floored me here.
I probably am going to try to not repeat too much. So we may see another LL song come up as a favorite, but I don't think
Yes,
we'll see another Smith. There's a couple more, but I love Ella so much. So, and it was kind of one of those, if there wasn't a song that I loved above the cultural relevance of another song, I'm going to go with the cultural relevance. So,
love it. So that threw me for a loop. Now, Joe, you also said you're going to, so let's just mind fuck this world. And what do you got?
No. So that was my pick for this year. Really interestingly, originally when I had gone through and I thought we were doing all of the 80s in last week's, I had picked this out as my 88 choice because although it was released in 87, it saw its commercial success in 88. And actually, to pile on to what Gregory already said about it, one, that song charted in 25 countries. The commercial success of that song is bananas. It's absolutely massive. It hit number one, I believe, both in the US, the UK, Australia, and I want to say in Canada as well. Just absolutely insane. But more interestingly, it was supposedly also used in psychological warfare against the Panama dictator. They used a couple of songs, but that was one of the 3 or 4 that was in rotation as music warfare, which is just absolutely brilliant. The legacy of that song. Some of the other choices I had on my short list, my original 87 pick was I Want to Dance with Somebody. I absolutely love that song. I make Amanda dance with me to it at least a couple of times a month. Some of the ones Gregory mentioned, Faith, George Michael, I Need Love, LL. Just Like Heaven is one of my favorite songs of all time.
Yes.
Every version I've ever heard of it is amazing. Man in the Mirror, again, we've talked about, I would never put MJ as a number 1 because of the problematic stuff that comes along with it, but I do think at least acknowledging the importance of that song, I really do love it. Sweet Child of Mine, there are very few guitar riffs that are more recognizable than Sweet Child of Mine. Like when that comes on, you know immediately what you're getting. I've Had the Time of My Life, amazing. Boys in the Hood, very, very amazing. Was it Ice Cube wrote that song like when he was 17 or something like that and took it to Easy. Absolutely phenomenal. I think that pretty much covers my list. But yeah, Rick Astley, Never Gonna Give You Up. The enduring legacy of that song.
Brothers Dilcox, Rick rolling me on night 2.
And it's funny he makes Amanda dance to I Want to Dance with Somebody. I've seen this. I know it's true. But I don't think I've ever told you this, Joe, but I had a relationship with a woman in DC that did not go well. And the trip where we ended up breaking up was shortly after her passing. And when I got into the cab with her, when I got into DC, that was the song that started playing immediately when we got in the cab. So I took it as a great omen, and then the week turned sour pretty quickly.
Oh my.
Don't you put that negativity on me.
Well, I just got rickrolled by the both of you, and I'm going to go with a song that charted in 14 countries and was later on covered by Tom Jones and Natalie Imbruglia, that nobody gives them any respect, but they should. Singer's life was taken too soon. Mr. Michael Hutchence, In Excess, Never Tear Us Apart. I believe the greatest song of that year. It's not only one of my all-time favorite songs, but I just think it transcends time and really speaks to the life of Michael Hutchence. I'm old enough to remember when he did pass, just the shockwaves it sent through the music community and just community in general, kind of like when we lose somebody now who's just been such a big part of music. The lyrics in that track are just so poignant and heartfelt. And I remember the first time I heard it, just listening to that album, which such a great album to begin with. But as a kid, just being like, holy shit, this has some weight. And I think there's a lot of fun music out that year, but when it comes down to it, that is the song for me. That is a song that can be heard at any event, any time, anywhere. It doesn't matter, and it's going to grip people and just bring them in. So In Excess, Never Tear Us Apart. And I'm happy that one of my favorite singers, Natalie Imbruglia, also covered it because she doesn't get the love she deserves from Down Under. But I just, man, that song just, I know I mentioned last time how Purple Rain is my favorite song of all time. When I hear Never Tear Us Apart, that just like grips every organ in my body and every blood vessel. And so it was a no-brainer for me. I was happy to actually just be able to say like, yeah, there it is.
I like that your first song in this discussion was a cover, and your next song was a song you also love covers of.
I'm a complicated individual.
But the cover conversation, as well as When I Want to Dance with Somebody, charted, and also Joe's selection of, or putting Boys in the Hood on the short list, because that NWA album comes out the next year, but the single was released. And I don't know if I Want to Dance with Somebody was a single released the next year, or if the single was released and just didn't chart.
Single charted the next year for that song, because I definitely had to look at that, because that's one of my favorite songs.
And I know it charted, but was it like it released as a single that year? Was it like an end of the year album that then the single was released in the year?
I believe it was released in October and it charted in January.
Okay. Because I'm just curious, since we're doing by year, if it's a case where there's a December album, but the second single after the album's released hits in January and has a bigger release that year, are we considering it released with the album, or are we considering the single release as a separate thing? Because especially in the time period we're talking about in the 80s, singles were a big deal. Like the 7-inch single with the B-side. I mean, the fact that
even as we moved through the 90s with Master P, it was all about singles. So yeah, that is going to be an interesting point to bring up.
But I don't think that has changed either, though, right? Because with now digital releases, I mean, I go back to A Day to Remember Well so much because they're one of my favorite bands. But they just released an album about a month ago, but one of their first singles off it, Mind Reader, was released almost a year ago. Because when you get a song recorded, it's easy enough now to just release it via so many different means that it's consumable and it builds hype for an album. Yeah. So I think singles are always going to play an interesting role in the conversation of music of the year. You know?
So ultimately we roll with track release date as opposed to album release date. And I think that's fair.
I almost said to hell with it and left Rick Astley as my 88, because I also think there's a conversation to be had about whether or not something was released in a year. When was it most impactful? When was it most important? Because something can, this is a silly example, but Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead came back into the charts when Thatcher died. And so much of that is culturally relevant, at least in the UK, for that reason. I mean, there's something to be said about the cultural impact of something re-emerging.
Well, and also like a great movie soundtrack that has a single release from the movie that maybe was in the trailer and in like the emotional scene of the movie. Now all of a sudden it's re-released again. And I don't necessarily think that repurposing a song for a movie or as part of like the kickoff to a greatest hits album is all that too much different than using a cover.
I mean, it's interesting. You look at like, say, the Garden State cover or the Garden State soundtrack, which all of a sudden, you have some old time musicians getting some love on there. Simon and Garfunkel track started they won the soundtrack of the year. So all of a sudden Simon and Garfunkel became relevant again. Nick Drake becomes relevant. People who'd never heard him before heard of him, so it's interesting, but we have to look at the fact those tracks were already out. And they may have relevance in a year, but they're not quite in that year.
Yeah, and that'll be curious. I think we can just go with it. But I'd like to hear what the 30-some-odd viewers think and comment down below. I won't troll you, I promise.
You'll just troll me. I can't believe I got rickrolled by the brothers Dilcox. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around that.
I should have left it as 88 and rickrolled you 2 weeks in a row.
Now, what's interesting is, to me, the 80s are amazing. And actually, I'm looking at my notes, and in the next 2 years, 2 more of my favorite songs are up, and then the 90s gets into this whole clusterfuck.
The next 2 years are tough. I have a couple of more whole albums. And then one artist I didn't give my asterisks that it should be the whole album. I just listed 6 of the songs off that album. So I will change that before we record next week. Unrelated though, I was looking at your YouTube page, Dan, that we are currently on right now. And I have surpassed the first Zoe video with the interview you did with me by 2 views, but one of your Snyder Cuts videos has surpassed me by 3 views. So if you're watching this, please go and watch the interview Dan did with me. Even if you've already seen it, just put it on in the background so that video could become the most watched video on Dan's YouTube channel.
It does deserve much more credit than the Snyder Cut. No offense to Corey, he's a great guy, but fuck that movie. But
haven't seen either of them.
You're fortunate. I'm loving this, and you guys both surprised the shit out of me tonight. So
I'm excited for next year because one of my all-time favorite songs, a lot of sentimental value to it, as well as I was born in '89. So I have a pretty big list for that year.
Which year is that?
'89.
Oh, for '89. Okay, awesome. I
guess not next year, next week's conversation, but
yes. Do you want to go 88, 89, 90 next week, or do we just want to do 88, 89 and then start fresh with the 90s? Because we're going to do all 10 years for the 90s. That'd be 5 segments.
I'm down with leaving 90s on their own. Finish up the 80s, do some 90s.
I'm beyond pumped for the 90s, but I'm also beyond ecstatic about challenging myself for those because it gets a little dicey in there. But
I'm excited. I think 95 to 2005 will be when we're the most animated because that'll be through at least a section of all 3 of our teens. So yes. That 10-year period is going to be really, I mean, Joe will only be 6 in 95, but he'll be in high school by 2005. But knowing though Joe's upbringing, there was a lot of music in his life by the time he was 6. So
I'm gonna have to set aside a lot of my Tony Yayo and Curtis Jackson bootleg copies that I had and get through some real music. No, I appreciate you, gentlemen. This has been fun, and I'm still trying to grapple with this whole being Rickrolled tonight. But props to you for doing it without even realizing it.
Well, we Rickrolled you, and we also Rickrolled each other. So.
Yeah, I was not expecting that at all. I'm actually kind of disappointed. Took my thunder.
All because Dan had to change the order from last week. Otherwise,
I know.
You would have Rickrolled me.
Yeah, fuck me. I'm just sitting here trying to figure out how to deal with it.
Well, the best part about this is I knew Joe had changed it, and I'd thought about mentioning to him that mine was Rickroll because we both knew what 87 was for each other. And I for some reason didn't, and I stopped myself short of that, and I now probably should because one of us could have given Tina Turner the nod.
And, she was number 2 for me, actually.
So does she end up number 2 in all 3 of our lists?
I think so.
All right, then I'm changing at the end of the video. My number 1 is Tina Turner.
Well,
so I'm a reverse Rickroll there.
I believe you mean Whitney Houston.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Tina Turner. Wow. I wrote Tina Turner too, and that's why I screwed up. But no, Whitney
Gregory.
Houston.
No, going to dance with somebody. Yeah. Now we also have to determine the winner of the decade. So keep that in mind because we're wrapping up.
Oh, yeah, that is next week.
We have to determine that. And this is going to get bloody because it can't end in Rick Astley.
It should. The lasting legacy.
It's the only one that got 2 in the year. So
LL got 2.
No, yeah. LL.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So it's LL. It's decided.
Not yet.
Do either of you guys own multiple Rick Astley vinyls?
I don't own a single Rick Astley vinyl, but I do own what the hell is it? It's a signed picture that somebody gave me as a gag gift that's in my basement somewhere.
That's an excellent gift. That's not even a gag gift.
Has Rick Astley ever responded to either of you guys on Twitter?
Yes.
Because he hasn't me. Oh, okay. That was going to be my other argument for Ellos. He has responded to Joe on Twitter.
That is true. I thought I was gonna say something because I thought you were gonna say like tell a story about him responding to you, and I was like, oh, he's also responded to me.
Yeah, no, Todd. I forgot what it was. It was about when Versus first started, and he asked who we should go against, and I forgot what I even said, but he replied to me on that one. But yes, that has happened. But
okay, well, that argument is washed then.
I think we have a lot of interesting discussions to go, and probably what will next be our next 45 videos or so. And I really look forward to all of it. I may not have you pegged as well as I thought when it comes to these predictions. So I'm interested in the next 2 years to come.
I mean, I thought you were going to go Luther Vandross, so obviously I don't know anything either.
Have you been stalking my playlists?
No, I just honestly, it was either that. I was guessing either that or Prince again.
Yeah, I mean, for the last like 4 weeks, it's been Luther Vandross and Lloyd Banks. So you were almost spot on. But no, big Luther fan. There's certain tracks that resonate from each year for me, and I've been big on music ever since I can remember. Just back when we were recording songs on tape off the radio and all that stuff. But music's just always been everything to me. So each decade has just tracks that I will never get past. So it's interesting that my 2 favorite songs of all time are already done. So from here, it's just, where do we go now?
But your favorite live performance of a song is coming up. So
indeed it is. And I'm interested to see where it falls.
Little teaser.
I'm interested to see where that falls though, because for that year, I don't believe that it's my favorite song.
Oh, I would see. That's a curveball you're throwing at me because I followed you. I follow you on Facebook. We are friends there. And when you posted this performance, I was like, well, I know what Dan's 88 song is.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting. And I know where you are with that. And I thought about that. I actually mentioned it earlier. I rewatched the performance as well. But no, there's so many to choose from. And to be honest, 88 is actually my 5th favorite song of all time, and one that I don't think anybody's ever heard. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Well, people have heard, but not enough people have heard. And I'm going to leave it at that and hope that people actually listen after I say it.
There's a song I think you could potentially be talking about, but at the same time, it's on the Target weekend rotation and on their overhead speakers. So
I assure you it is not then.
Okay.
This is a song that I don't know has been played on a radio station since the year it came out, whether it's Store or that song. But if you want to do some digging, do it because you'll be pleasantly surprised.
I actually just kind of want to be pleasantly surprised.
I love it.
And then if I was right, I want to mock you for having a Target track as your song to be.
I'll accept that. I'll even wear a Target shirt in the next video. That'll work.
Actually, and I'm not going to just say this because I worked there for many years and have many great friends still working at Target, but the Target overhead playlist is pretty damn good.
Yeah, I heard was it Mirror in the Bathroom by the English Beat at one point when I was shopping there. I was like, okay, I can get down with this.
I'm Bad is a regular rotation. I love Carly Rae, and there's about 6 or 7 songs, including that one she did with Owl City, which I do not like. But Spoon, there's 5 or 6 songs in the rotation, and Spoon is one of my favorite live performances ever, having seen them a few times now. So yeah, the Target's not bad. Even this artist Torres, who's just fantastic, and I love one of her tracks, is a regular Target play, and it just blew my mind hearing it because I'm like looking around trying to find someone who can confirm I'm hearing it, and no one in the store knows who she is. And I'm like, yeah, no, this is my vinyl collection you guys are playing Target.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the Target overhead music is great. Overnight, they do a lot of weird techno remixes and stuff. So I don't recommend working at a Target overnight without headphones.
Yeah, I'll take my Tiesto and just leave it at the door. With that said, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to next Tuesday. We're diving into some really interesting years for music and into the Kurt Loder era. So I'm pumped.
It's Kurt Loder, your favorite artist of 1989?
Yeah.
Just his voice coming across with the latest MTV news?
Yes. The Loder Report. Gentlemen, I hope you have a great night. Thank you for joining me.
You as well, Dan.
Amazing.
Thanks for having us, Dan.
All right, much love.